Before learning how to handle exceptions, you need to understand what they are and how Java organizes them. In Java, when something goes wrong during program execution, Java creates an object to represent that problem. That object is an instance of a class that belongs to the exception hierarchy. Understanding this hierarchy tells you exactly what you are dealing with and what you can and cannot handle. At the very top of everything sits a class called throwable. Every single error and exception in Java is a descendant of throwable. Throwable has two direct children, error and exception, and they represent two completely different categories of problems. Error represents serious problems at the JVM level, things that are outside your control as a programmer. Out-of-memory error means the JVM ran out of heap memory. Stack Overflow error means your program made too many recursive method calls and the call stack ran out of space. These are not bugs you can fix by catching them. You do not write code to handle errors, they indicate the system itself is broken or your program has a fundamental structural problem. Exception represents problems that occur at the program level, things you as a programmer can anticipate, catch, and recover from. Someone tried to open a file that does not exist. A network connection was refused. A number was divided by 0. These are situations your code can handle gracefully. Exception itself splits into two subcategories. Checked exceptions are exceptions the compiler forces you to handle, you cannot ignore them. If a method can throw a checked exception, your code must either catch it or declare that it passes it along. IO exception and SQL exception are examples. Unchecked exceptions fall under runtime exception, the compiler does not force you to handle them. They represent programming mistakes like accessing a null reference or going out of array bounds. We will cover the difference in detail later in this video. Before try-catch existed, when an exception occurred the program would simply crash, it would print an ugly error message and stop completely. Try-catch gives you the ability to intercept that crash, deal with the problem, and let the program continue running normally. The idea is simple. You wrap the risky code, the code that might go wrong, inside a try block. You then write a catch block immediately after it specifying what type of exception you are watching for. If the code inside try throws that exception, Java jumps immediately to the matching catch block and runs it. After catch finishes, the program continues normally from after the catch block. If no exception occurs, the catch block is completely ignored, Java skips right over it. The program runs as if the catch block does not exist. There is one very important behavior to understand. The moment an exception is thrown on a line inside the try block, all remaining lines in that try block are immediately abandoned. Java does not finish the try block, it jumps straight to catch. So if you have 5 lines in a try block and the exception happens on line 2, lines 3, 4, and 5 are never executed. This is why you should put only the risky code inside the try block, not everything. Putting unnecessary code inside try hides logic and makes it unclear which line actually caused the problem. We have one class called main, and inside the main method we can see a try-catch block in action. This example demonstrates exactly what happens when an exception is thrown and how Java handles it gracefully. The first line prints program starts. This line is outside the try block so it runs normally without any issue. Then we enter the try block. Inside the try block we declare two integer variables. A is assigned the value 10 and B is assigned the value 0. Then we attempt to divide A by B and store the result in a variable called result. This is where the problem occurs. Dividing any number by 0 is illegal in Java. The moment Java tries to execute this division it throws an arithmetic exception. this exception is created as an object and Java immediately looks for a matching catch block to handle it. The very next line inside the try block which prints the result is completely skipped. Java does not finish executing the try block. It abandons everything that is left and jumps straight to the catch block. This is an important behavior to remember. Any lines that come after the line that threw the exception inside the try block will never run. The catch block is written to catch an arithmetic exception. Since the exception that was thrown is indeed an arithmetic exception, the catch block matches and Java runs it. Inside the catch block we have access to the exception object through the variable e. We call e.getMessage which returns a short description of what went wrong. In this case the message is /by0. So the catch block prints error caught /by0. After the catch block finishes executing, the program does not stop. It resumes normally from the line after the catch block and prints program continues. The final output is program starts on the first line, then error caught /by0 on the second line, then program continues on the third line. Without the try-catch block this program would have crashed completely at the division line. The error message would have been printed by Java automatically and program continues would never have appeared. The try-catch block is what gave us the ability to intercept that crash, handle it cleanly, and keep the program running. In real programs, a single block of code can potentially throw several different types of exceptions. You might be reading a file, parsing a number from it, and accessing an array, 3 different operations, 3 different possible exceptions. Multiple catch blocks let you handle each exception type separately with appropriate responses. When an exception is thrown, Java looks at your catch blocks one by one from top to bottom. It checks whether the catch block handles the type of exception that was just thrown. The first catch block that matches wins. That block runs. All other catch blocks are skipped. Only ever one catch block runs per exception. The order of your catch blocks is critically important. More specific exception types must come before more general ones. This is because exception classes form a hierarchy. Arithmetic exception is a child of runtime exception which is a child of exception. If you put catch exception at the top, it matches everything including arithmetic exception, so your specific catch blocks below it would never get a chance to run. Java actually enforces this and gives you a compile error if you put a broader exception before a narrower one that is its subclass. Java 7 also introduced a feature called multi-catch where you can catch multiple exception types in a single catch block by separating them with a pipe symbol, but for clarity in beginner learning we write them as separate blocks. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have one class called main and inside the main method we have an integer array called numbers that contains 3 elements, 10 at index 0, 20 at index 1, and 30 at index 2. The valid indexes for this array are only 0, 1, and 2. Inside the try block we attempt to do 2 things in a single line. First we try to access numbers at index 5. Then we try to divide that value by 0 and store the result. The very first thing Java tries to execute is accessing index 5 of the array. Index 5 does not exist in this array because the array only has 3 elements. The moment Java tries to access index 5 it throws an arrayIndex out of bounds exception. The exception is thrown right there and Java immediately abandons the rest of the try block. The division by 0 never even gets a chance to happen because the exception was already thrown before reaching that part of the operation. Now Java starts checking the catch blocks one by one from top to bottom. The first catch block is written to handle arrayIndex out of bounds exception. Java checks whether the thrown exception matches this type. It does. So this catch block runs and prints array error followed by the message from the exception which tells us that index 5 is out of bounds for an array of length 3. Java then skips all remaining catch blocks because only one catch block ever runs per exception. The second catch block for arithmetic exception is completely skipped. The third catch block for the general exception type is also completely skipped. After the catch block finishes, the program resumes normally and prints program continues. The final output is array error index 5 out of bounds for length 3 on the first line and program continues on the second line. Now it is worth understanding what would happen if we changed the array access to a valid index like index 0 and kept the divisor as 0. In that case, the array access would succeed and Java would then attempt the division by 0. That would throw an arithmetic exception. Java would check the catch blocks from top to bottom. The first catch block for array index out of bounds exception would not match. The second catch block for arithmetic exception would match and that block would run instead. The general exception catch block at the very bottom acts as a safety net. If any exception is thrown that does not match any of the specific catch blocks above it, the general exception block will catch it because every exception in Java is a descendant of exception. This is why the order of catch blocks matters so much. Always write the most specific exceptions first and the most general ones last. The finally block solves a critical real-world problem. Imagine your program opens a database connection, then runs some code inside a try block. If an exception is thrown and caught, your connection closing code might be skipped. If an exception is thrown and not caught, your connection closing code is definitely skipped. In both cases you have a resource leak, the connection stays open, wasting memory and potentially blocking other users. The finally block guarantees that its code runs no matter what. Exception or no exception. Caught or uncaught. Return statement in try or catch. It does not matter. Java always executes the finally block before moving on. This makes finally the ideal place for cleanup code, closing file readers, closing database connections, releasing locks, cleaning up temporary files. This code absolutely must run and finally guarantees it. One nuance: if both the catch block and the finally block throw exceptions, the exception from finally suppresses the exception from catch. The catch exception is lost. This is a known subtlety and is one reason why try with resources was introduced in Java 7, which we will see at the end of this video as the modern replacement for manual finally cleanup. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have one class called main and inside the main method we have to separate try catch finally blocks. Each one demonstrates the finally block under a different condition. This is the clearest way to prove what finally actually guarantees. Starting with test 1. We attempt to divide 10 by 2 and store the result. This is a perfectly valid operation. No exception is thrown. The try block runs completely and prints result 5. Since no exception occurred, the catch block is completely skipped. Java does not even look at it. But then something important happens. Even though everything went perfectly fine and there was no exception at all, the finally block still runs and prints finally runs cleanup done. This is the core guarantee of finally. It does not matter whether an exception occurred or not. Finally always executes. Now moving to test 2. We attempt to divide 10 by 0. This is illegal in Java and immediately throws an arithmetic exception. The line that would have printed the result is completely skipped. Java jumps to the catch block which matches arithmetic exception and prints the error message which is /by0. After the catch block finishes, just like in test 1, the finally block runs and prints finally runs cleanup done. So in test 1 there was no exception and finally ran. In test 2 there was an exception and finally still ran. This is the guarantee that finally provides. It does not matter what happens inside the try block or the catch block. Finally will always execute before the program moves on. In a real application, the finally block would not contain a simple print statement. It would contain critical cleanup code like closing a database connection or closing a file reader. This ensures that no matter what happens during execution, those resources are always properly released and never left open by accident. The final output shows result 5 followed by finally runs cleanup done for test 1, and then error/by0 followed by finally runs cleanup done for test 2. So far the exceptions we have seen were thrown automatically by Java, divide by 0, null reference, array out of bounds. But what about situations where the input is technically valid Java but makes no sense for your specific program? For example, what if someone sets a person's age to -50? Java sees no problem with storing -50 in an int variable. But your program should not allow it. The throw keyword lets you take control and manually trigger an exception based on your own logic. You write throw, then create a new exception object with a meaningful error message, and Java treats it exactly the same as if the JVM had thrown it naturally. It travels up the call stack looking for a catch block. This is powerful because it lets you enforce your own rules and signal clearly to the caller that they passed something invalid. Instead of silently allowing bad data to corrupt your object, you immediately stop execution and say that this input is not acceptable and here is why. You can throw any exception type, a built-in one like illegal argument exception, null pointer exception, or arithmetic exception, or your own custom exception class which we will see shortly. The message you pass to the constructor becomes available through getMessage when the exception is caught. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have two classes here: bank account and main. This example shows how the throw keyword lets you enforce your own business rules and stop execution the moment something invalid happens. Starting with the bank account class. It has one field called balance of type double. The constructor takes a starting balance as a parameter. But before assigning it, the constructor checks whether the balance is negative. If someone tries to create a bank account with a negative starting balance, the throw keyword fires immediately and creates a new illegal argument exception with a clear message explaining what went wrong. The object is never created. The constructor never finishes. Java immediately looks for a catch block to handle this exception. The withdraw method has to separate checks before it allows any money to be taken out. The first check asks whether the withdrawal amount is 0 or negative. A withdrawal of 0 or a negative value makes no sense as a business operation. If this condition is true, throw fires immediately with an illegal argument exception explaining that the withdrawal amount must be positive. The second check asks whether the withdrawal amount is greater than the current balance. You cannot withdraw more money than you have. If this condition is true, throw fires with an arithmetic exception explaining that there are insufficient funds and showing the current balance. If both checks pass, then the withdrawal is valid. The amount is subtracted from the balance and a confirmation message is printed showing how much was withdrawn and how much remains. Now let us look at the main class. Everything is wrapped inside a try block with two catch blocks, one for illegal argument exception and one for arithmetic exception. We create a bank account with a starting balance of 1000. The constructor checks whether 1000 is negative. It is not, so the object is created successfully. Then we call withdraw with 200. The first check passes because 200 is positive. The second check passes because 200 is less than 1000. The withdrawal succeeds and the balance becomes 800. The output is withdrawn 200.0 and remaining 800.0. Then we call withdraw with 900. The first check passes because 900 is positive. But the second check fails because 900 is greater than the current balance of 800. The throw keyword fires immediately and creates a new arithmetic exception with the message insufficient funds and the current balance of 800. That exception travels up the call stack to the main class. Java checks the catch blocks one by one. The first catch block for illegal argument exception does not match. The second catch block for arithmetic exception matches. That block runs and prints transaction failed followed by the exception message. The final output is withdrawn 200.0 remaining 800.0 on the first line and transaction failed insufficient funds balance 800.0 on the second line. What makes this example powerful is that throw is not just for Java errors. It lets you define and enforce your own application-specific rules with meaningful error messages that tell the caller exactly what went wrong and why. There is an important distinction between throw and throws. They look similar but do completely different things. Throw is the action of actually creating and throwing an exception object at a specific point in code. Throws is a declaration in the method signature that says this method might throw this type of exception and I am not going to handle it here. When a method can throw a checked exception, the kind the compiler forces you to handle, you have two choices. Either you wrap the risky code in a try-catch and handle it yourself inside the method. Or you declare throws exception type in the method signature and let the caller deal with it. The throws keyword passes the responsibility upward in the call chain. The caller must then either catch the exception or also declare throws in its own signature and pass it further up. This chain continues until someone actually catches it, or it reaches main and crashes the program with a stack trace. The important question is when should you handle versus when should you throws? Handle it inside the method if the method itself has enough context to recover meaningfully. Declare throws if the method does not know the right way to recover, only the caller knows what to do when something goes wrong. For example, a file reading utility method does not know whether the caller wants to show an error dialog, retry, or use a default file. So it declares throws IOException and lets the caller decide. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have two classes here: FileReader and main. This example perfectly demonstrates the difference between handling an exception yourself and passing the responsibility up to the caller using throws. Starting with the FileReader class. It has one method called readFirstLine that takes a file name as a string parameter. Inside this method we create a file object using the file name and then create a scanner to read from that file. We then return the first line of the file using scanner.nextLine. Now here is the important part. Creating a scanner from a file can throw a file not found exception if the file does not exist at the given path. This is a checked exception, which means the compiler forces someone to handle it. Instead of writing a try-catch block inside readFirstLine, we declare throws file not found exception in the method signature. This is the method saying that it knows this operation can fail, it is not going to handle it here, and it is passing that responsibility up to whoever calls this method. Without the throws file not found exception declaration in the method signature, the compiler would immediately refuse to compile this code. That is the nature of checked exceptions. Someone in the chain must acknowledge them. Now let us look at the main class. We create a FileReader object called reader. Then we call reader.readFirstLine and pass the file name test.txt. Because readFirstLine declared throws file not found exception, the compiler now forces the caller, which is main, to handle it. We wrap the call in a try-catch block with a catch for file not found exception. Since the file test.txt does not exist on the system, the moment Java tries to create the scanner inside React first line, it throws a file not found exception. That exception is not caught inside React first line because React first line chose not to handle it. So the exception travels up the call stack to the main method where the catch block is waiting. The catch block matches file not found exception and prints file not found followed by the exception message which tells us the file does not exist. The final output is file not found test.txt, no such file or directory. The responsibility chain in this example is very clean. React first line focuses only on reading the file and declares the problem if something goes wrong. Main is the one that knows what to do when the file is not found, so main is the one that handles it. This is exactly the right way to use throws. Push the responsibility to whoever has enough context to handle it properly. Java gives you a rich set of built-in exceptions, but they are general purpose. Arithmetic exception, illegal argument exception. These names tell you the technical category of the problem but nothing about your specific application domain. When a doctor's age is set to 300 years or a product price is set to -500, throwing a generic illegal argument exception is technically correct but not very informative. Custom exceptions let you give your errors meaningful, domain-specific names. Invalid age exception, insufficient funds exception, invalid student grade exception. These names immediately tell any developer reading the code exactly what went wrong in the context of your application. No guessing required. Creating a custom exception is straightforward. You create a new class and extend either exception for a checked custom exception or runtime exception for an unchecked one. Inside the class you write a constructor that accepts a string message and passes it to the parent constructor using super with the message passed into it. That is all you need for a basic custom exception. You can also add custom fields to your exception, for example storing the invalid value that caused the problem, so the catch block has more information to work with. You can add multiple constructors, custom methods, and any extra data your situation requires. When to use checked versus unchecked custom exceptions. If the caller can reasonably be expected to recover from the error, make it checked by extending exception. If the error represents a programming mistake that should not normally happen in correct code, make it unchecked by extending runtime exception. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have three classes here: invalid age exception, person, and main. This example shows how to create and use a custom exception that carries extra information beyond just a message. Starting with the invalid age exception class. This is our custom exception. It extends exception which makes it a checked exception, meaning the compiler will force anyone who might encounter it to handle it. Invalid age exception has one extra field called invalid age of type int. This field stores the actual invalid value that caused the problem. The constructor takes two parameters, a string message and an int age. The first thing the constructor does is call super with the message passed into it. This passes the message up to exceptions constructor so that when someone calls getMessage on this exception later they get a descriptive message back. Then the constructor stores the age value in the invalid age field for later access. Now let us look at the person class. It has two fields, name and age. The constructor takes name and age as parameters. Before doing anything else it checks whether the age is below 0 or above 150. Both of these conditions represent biologically impossible ages. If either condition is true, throw fires immediately and creates a new invalid age exception with a descriptive message and the invalid age value. The person object is never created. Since invalid exception is a checked exception, the constructor must declare throws invalid exception in its signature so the compiler knows this can happen. The display method simply prints the name and age of the person. Now let us look at the main class. Everything is wrapped inside a try block with a catch for invalid exception. First we create a person called Alice with age 25. The constructor checks whether 25 is below 0 or above 150. It is neither, so the check passes. The person object is created successfully and display is called. The output is name Alice age 25. Then we create a person called Bob with age -5. The constructor checks whether -5 is below 0. It is. So throw fires immediately and creates a new invalid exception with the message age out of valid range -5 and stores -5 in the invalid age field. The constructor stops immediately and the person object is never created. The line that would have called display on P2 is never reached. The exception travels up the call stack to the catch block in main. The catch block matches invalid exception and runs. It first calls e.getMessage, which returns a descriptive message and prints custom exception caught age out of valid range -5. Then it accesses e.invalidAge directly, which is the custom field we added, and prints the invalid age was -5. The final output is name Alice age 25 on the first line, then custom exception caught age out of valid range -5 on the second line, then the invalid age was -5 on the third line. The key advantage shown here is that our custom exception carries more than just a message. It carries the actual invalid value in a dedicated field. The catch block can access that field directly and use it however it needs to. This is what makes custom exceptions significantly more useful than generic built-in ones in real application development. This is one of the most important distinctions in Java exception handling, and understanding it clearly will save you enormous confusion. Checked exceptions represent situations where something outside your program's control might go wrong, and you can reasonably prepare for it. When you read a file, the file might not exist. That is not a programming mistake, files get deleted. When you connect to a database, the server might be down, not your fault, servers go offline. These are real-world external failures you should plan for. The compiler agrees and forces you to write handling code for them. If you call a method that throws a checked exception and you do not handle it, your code simply will not compile. The compiler refuses. Unchecked exceptions, which are all subclass of runtime exception, represent programming mistakes. Accessing a null reference, you should have checked for null. Going out of array bounds, you should have validated the index. Dividing by 0, you should have checked the divisor. These are bugs in your logic that should not happen in correctly written code. The compiler does not force you to handle them because theoretically you should fix the code so they never occur. If they do occur at runtime, it means your code has a bug. This is why the rule of thumb is, checked means the exception can happen even with perfect code, prepare for it. Unchecked means the exception happens because of imperfect code, fix the code. Both can be caught with try-catch if you choose to. The distinction is only about whether the compiler forces you to. You can always catch a null-pointed exception if you want to, the compiler just does not require you to. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have one class called main, and inside the main method we have 3 separate blocks. Each one demonstrates a different scenario involving checked and unchecked exceptions. Together they show exactly what the compiler does and does not warn you about. Starting with the first block. We attempt to open a file called missing.txt using a scanner. File not found exception is a checked exception. This means the compiler knows this operation can fail and it forces you to handle it. If you remove the try-catch block from this code, the compiler would immediately refuse to compile it. You would get a compile error. You have no choice but to acknowledge and handle this exception. Since the file missing.txt does not exist on the system, the scanner throws a file not found exception at runtime. The catch block matches and prints checked caught, followed by the exception message telling us the file does not exist. Moving to the second block, we declare a string variable called s and assign null to it. Then we try to call .length on s. Null pointer exception is an unchecked exception. This means the compiler does not care whether you handle it or not. If you remove the try-catch block from this code, the compiler would still compile it without any complaint. The compiler never warns you about potential null pointer exceptions. But at runtime, when Java tries to call .length on a null reference, it throws a null pointer exception because there is no object there to call the method on. We chose to catch it here and print unchecked caught cannot call method on null. Moving to the third block, we have an integer array called arr with 3 elements at index 0, 1, and 2. We then try to access index 10, which does not exist. There is no try-catch block written here at all. The compiler has absolutely no complaint about this. It compiles perfectly fine. But at runtime, when Java tries to access index 10 of an array that only has 3 elements, it throws an array index out of bounds exception. Since there is no catch block to intercept it, the exception is completely unhandled. The program crashes immediately and prints a full stack trace to the console showing the exception type, the message telling us index 10 is out of bounds for an array of length 3, and the line number where it happened. The final output shows the checked exception being caught cleanly in the first block, the unchecked exception being caught cleanly in the second block, and the program crashing with a full stack trace in the third block. This example makes the distinction between checked and unchecked exceptions very concrete. Checked exceptions are enforced by the compiler and you must handle them. Unchecked exceptions are invisible to the compiler, and if you do not handle them yourself, they will crash your program at runtime with no warning. We learned that finally is used to close resources. But writing correct resource cleanup code using finally is surprisingly tricky. You have to declare the resource variable outside the try block so finally can access it. You have to check if it is not null before closing. The close method itself can throw an exception which might suppress the original exception. And if you have multiple resources, the code becomes deeply nested and hard to read. Java 7 introduced try with resources as the clean modern solution to all of these problems. The idea is elegant. You declare and open your resource inside parentheses right after the try keyword. Java guarantees that no matter what happens inside the try block, the resources close method will be called automatically when the block ends. Exception or no exception. You never need to write finally for resource cleanup again. For a class to be usable as a resource in try with resources, it must implement the autoclosable interface. Autoclosable has just one method, close. The good news is that almost every resource class in Java already implements this: file reader, buffered reader, connection, scanner, and hundreds more. So in practice you can use try with resources with everything you would normally need to close. You can declare multiple resources in the same try parentheses separated by semicolons. Java closes them in the reverse order of declaration. The last opened resource is the first to be closed. This is exactly the right order because the most recently opened resource may depend on an earlier one. Let us walk through this code step by step. We have one class called main, and inside the main method we have to separate blocks that do exactly the same thing but in two completely different ways. The first block shows the old manual approach to resource management. The second block shows the modern try with resources approach. Comparing them side by side makes it very clear why try with resources was introduced. Starting with the old way, we declare a buffered reader variable called reader_old outside the try block and set it to null. It has to be declared outside the try block because the finally block needs to access it. If we declared it inside the try block, the finally block would not be able to see it. Inside the try block, we create a new buffered reader wrapping a new file reader that tries to open a file called test.txt. Then we try to read the first line and print it. Since test.txt does not exist on the system, creating the file reader throws an IO exception immediately. The catch block matches and prints the error message telling us the file does not exist. Then the finally block runs. Inside the finally block, we first check whether reader_old is null. This check is necessary because if the buffered reader constructor itself failed, reader_old was never assigned and is still null. Calling close on null would throw a null pointer exception. If reader_old is not null, we call close on it. But here is where it gets messy. The close method can also throw an IO exception. So the close call inside finally must itself be wrapped in another try catch block. This means we now have a try block inside a finally block just to safely close one single resource. The output is reader closed manually. Now the new way using try with resources. The buffered reader is declared directly inside the parentheses right after the try keyword. Java takes full responsibility for closing this resource when the try block ends, no matter what happens. Exception or no exception, the resource will be closed automatically. Inside the try block, we simply read the first line and print it. Since test.txt does not exist, the same IO exception is thrown. The catch block matches and prints the error message. After the catch block finishes, Java has already automatically called close on the reader behind the scenes. We do not write a finally block. We do not write a null check. We do not write a nested try catch. Java handles all of it silently. Then the program continues and prints reader closed automatically. The final output for the old way is error test.txt, no such file or directory, followed by reader closed manually. The final output for the new way is error test.txt, no such file or directory, followed by reader closed automatically. Both blocks do the same job. Both catch the same exception. Both close the resource. But the difference in code complexity is enormous. The old way required nested try catch blocks, a null check, and a finally block just to manage one resource safely. The new way does all of that in a single clean line. In real production Java code, you will almost always see try with resources. The old finally approach is now considered outdated for resource management. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this explanation helped you clearly understand the exception handling and its core components in a structured and easy way. Continue learning, keep practicing, and stay consistent with your preparation. More detailed concepts are coming next.